The problem is acute. Nobody knows what's real anymore. You can feel it on the internet that everyone is in crisis, and we're doing nothing but watching different stories play out, right? We have, obviously everyone is still very upset about Charlie Kirk's um, death, and the stories are just flying about, right? How can you tell? How can you, it's like, there's this theory and that theory and this theory and that theory. And of course, the problem we have, all of us, is it's all mediated. I mean, quite literally through the media, but there's also this problem that everything is coming in layers, right? It's not just the one media. It's not just one layer of media, and you're trying to figure out what layer of transparency to have through that one, but it's over and over and over again. What do we think about this part of the story? What do we think about that part of the story? That, well, this part's a lie because the official story is all a lie, and that part's a lie because it's actually the counter oppositional official lie, and nobody knows what's going on, and everybody's going completely crazy, right? And what I've been noticing, which is very interesting in the way in which the internet is shimmering out there, there's a lot of spiders in my neighborhood right now, and I was thinking this is a more spidery season than I remember previous falls being. We've got a lot of cicadas, we've got a lot of spiders, and I was looking at a spider in the park today and thinking how you can't see the web. Obviously, the webs are there not to catch people, but to catch insects. But they catch people, they catch dogs, they catch all of us who walk through them. And there's the spider, which you can see if you focus on her, there in the middle of this shimmering connection going from one branch to another. And it's a marvelous image of the invisibility of our media and the feeling of threat there in the middle. There's going to be, we spend all of our time like bugs getting caught in these media nets and wondering when the spider's going to come eat us, and we're going to find out that we've been lied to, we've been lying to each other, we've embraced a nonsense narrative that now we're going to be either made fools of for or fired for. Who knows, right? It's a traumatic and terrifying time, and the great enemy would seem to be, in fact, tradition. It's the connections that everyone has out there, right? And it's like, well, I know how tradition works. If you say this one thing and then it connects to this other thing and then it goes back to this previous thing, and before you know it, you got the Illuminati are in control of the world. I know. It's laughable, right? But I read it on a Substack. I read that in fact our as it were intellectual host for these conversations on the discarded image, Professor C.S. Lewis. I don't think he was a doctor, he was just a professor. Mr. Lewis was a member of some, but one, that he was a member of the Inklings, which makes him suspicious. Two, he was friends with Charles Williams, Charles Williams, which I grant does make him a little bit suspicious because Williams wrote things like the Greater Trumps, and I can't finish any of Williams' novels. Although one of my good friends in medieval studies insists that Williams' book on the descent of the dove, the Holy Spirit, is actually quite challenging and significant. But they're also friends. The Inklings also include Owen Barfield, who famously writes about poetic diction and mythology and the way language comes out of mythology becoming more real. And of course, their friend and my patron, fantasist, I suppose, Professor Tolkien. They're all straight up, the Inklings, straight up Illuminati. I've read it on the internet now. And the thing is, the way people say things on the internet, they say them and they simply become true. Didn't you know that the only people that got into Oxford in the early 20th century were all members of the old family? So if Tolkien got into Oxford, he's clearly one of them. Never mind that he was orphaned, and his mother, having converted Catholicism, was thrown out by her family, and he was raised by the priest at the Birmingham Oratory and his guardian, Father Morgan, And Oxford, even though he's the Birmingham Oratory is carrying on the mission and the teaching of now Saint John Henry Newman. In those days, it was still a bit suspicious to be Catholic. So of course, that proves that Tolkien is one of the occult members of the Anglican Illuminati, going back to the Rosicrucians, and of course there's always the Templars. And by the way, did you know John Dee? It's enough to make you nuts, right? And what's interesting is you're going to find, like, this is the tradition and the truth of the matter, that things are handed on over time, right? That they are handed on and grow and change. I mean, Tolkien has a beautiful image in one of his letters about how tradition is like a tree, right? It starts, and he's talking specifically about church tradition, that it starts from a seed. Trees are actually governed greatly by the conditions in which they grow. So, for example, an oak tree planted among other oak trees will grow very straight, because all the neighboring oak trees will take up the sunlight that it needs, and so those trees grow very straight, and you can use them to make certain kinds of ship masts, for example. But other oaks, if you let the oaks grow by themselves, clear cut, and then let the oaks grow, they grow up and more bendy and stuff, and they're useful for other things. And therefore, if you have the same seed, the same acorn, that then grows into these different kinds of trees, I suspect someone on the internet would now be screaming witchcraft rather than creation and environment and life, right? I think the main thing that I am sensing in the internet is this terror of the organic and the terror of the living. And it turns absolutely everything into not just a conspiracy theory, but a kind of, the spider web trap, right? And you're going to get trapped by these fakes. They're fake Christians. They're fake this. Most of it's usually fake. It's fake Christians, right? Because the primary tensions in the web of tradition, at least the ones that we're usually dealing with in the Mosaic Ark, are pagan versus Christian. So, and I'm certain you've seen this over and over and over again, right? It's like what you thought was Christian is actually pagan, which is what these posts were saying about Lewis. And they might not, the one about Lewis, you might have a point, because Lewis was very, very attracted to this late 19th, early 20th century argument that Jungians and Fraserians and Petersonians love that there's, one great story. Joseph Campbell makes the very famous in the Hero of the Thousand Faces, and Christ is, is in Lewis's version the realization of that one true great myth. And for Lewis, that convinced him that Christ had to be true because he was the real version of the myth. Now, Tolkien did not talk about myth or fairy stories or history in any of those terms. It's amazing that they stayed friends as long as they did. But hey, we stay friends with people that we disagree with. And maybe just because I'm friends with, one person doesn't mean I hold all of his ideas or that I agree with most of them. We can be friends and have disagreements over our mugs of beer, right? So the pagan and Christian one plays out. It's complicated. Christian and Jew. We have been worrying, and we've worried about that on the Mosaic Ark, about the locution Judeo-Christian and what it means and whether it's a reality, when, of course, the primary significant element in the relationship between the two of Judaism in relation to Christianity is Judaism does not accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah. So there's no Christianity in it, right? Christians obviously see Jesus as fulfilling the scriptures of the Old Testament, and therefore there is a relationship. But disentangling, just as disentangling pagan from Christian, disentangling Christian from Jewish, is a interesting problem, because they grew together in so many different ways. I keep going Catholic versus Protestant. A lot of what I see when people are anxious and angry and desperate to prove that you're not a true Christian is, of course, you're in the Catholic versus Protestant divide. And then the one we swim in constantly is, and the one that I took on as my professional problem, is the medieval versus modern. That the things that you think are modern are defined against this phantom that we call the medieval, which is, of course, what Lewis was worried about in setting up his study in the discarded image. What do we do with a world whose view we no longer share? Well, all of these, talk about spider webs, right? All of these are constantly in play. Christian versus pagan, the Christian versus Jew, the Catholic versus Protestant, the medieval versus modern, and probably several others, but these are the ones that I'm most conscious of right now. What we have been trying to do, and this is the most like monologue-y I've been in our videos, but it's a good time to do this, right? I need to monologue for you for a little bit to say what we've been doing in the Mosaic Ark. What we're trying to do in these conversations is track this tradition and show the way its layers are working to mediate our understanding constantly. And the thing is, if you study this tradition deeply, instead of just, I promise you, friends sent me the C.S. Lewis as an occultist, and I read it, and we could talk about that. We could go through it. It's got layers, obviously. But what I see when people do those sorts of things, like saying, Tolkien must have been an occultist because he got into Oxford, right? That you're drawing the wrong connections. You're assuming certain kinds of relationships that aren't there. You're believing in phantoms that the tradition itself has thrown up. A lot of stuff comes out in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. We're working with that in our poetry and we're thinking about it. But much of what we now think of as modern, for example, you will learn, and this is what we're going to be showing you tonight, particularly in our discussion of the Somium Scipionis. Much of what you think of as modern is actually often ancient. What you often think of as science is actually often alchemy. What you think of mythical is almost always, people's sense of what myth is completely modern and totally invented in the 19th century. It has no reference in the previous tradition, and yet it's been projected onto the Middle Ages like a Mark Twain satire, right? The main thing I would caution everybody about is to resist the temptation to go around screaming like one of the pod people, right? He's one of them, right? And that's, I got Casey laughing in the background on that one, right? That feels to me like what's happening on the internet all the time. You have nothing but people screaming and pointing. And hopefully what we're going to be able to do in these ongoing conversations this year on the tradition and the discarded image and the layers and the disentangling, one, we are Christian, we do serve our Lord Jesus Christ, and I do, challenge you, everyone who thinks that people who are not serving our Lord Jesus Christ can say that calmly, to consider that as a primary test. This is also a good one. My husband is now making comments in the background, so we will just ignore him. Things to think about that we're going to touch on tonight, which include a variety of things: dream visions, globe earth, souls, pagan or modern, Christian or science. It's time now to take the dive. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Okay. Are we ready now? We ready to to the deep dive. Well, hi everyone. River Run says aloha. John Abrisi says hello. Jacob Hansen, greetings. Nice to see you. River Run is cheers to beers. Well, we need the beers. I think we really need the beers tonight.
Yes,
And
a lot of beers.
Jan God very appropriately says, I blame the Victorians. They're always straight up, right? We can go there. So the thing is, I think it's funny when we get to the middle of things, you can tell when you're in the middle of a journey of some sort. And we're of course in the middle of the composition of Draco Alchemicus, and all sorts of things that weren't clear to us when we started are much easier to spot.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave.
Oh, we do. But we can say from the I don't know, the textile mill of Draco Alchemicus, that writing out the poetry and paying attention to all the stuff that's going on as we write is helping us clarify what's going on. It's a good you guys, if it just like I recognize watching enough like YouTube videos about how you get more YouTube viewers, and one of the things seems to be give people advice. So because everybody's here on the internet looking for answers, right? So my primary answer is write something out, right? It's like you're noticing things, you start noticing things. If you start writing it down, it helps you keep from going nuts. There, that's my lesson for the evening.
Yeah, journaling is good. But if you're a writer of fiction, there's so many inspirations out there, especially these days.
All the time. And the thing is, I don't really mean journaling, because so journaling is one kind of writing, which I've done like the free writing with the artist way, where you sort of free associate, write out, and it's very clarifying if you're trying to like let go of your censor on things. But this I mean like the kind of things that we do in order to write our stanzas, right? Which is take notes, right, and then art, create them into an actual structure, which then you have to, the structure itself is your guarantee of not going completely nuts, because you have to, it's got a reality that you have to balance against.
It's being on firm ground instead of floating around in your ideas. Just you have to land on one of them. You have to land on some solid ground.
Right. I've been like trawling the YouTube videos this past week, as everyone has been, and I did find a number of things that I've been sharing into the Telegram chat, but one of them was talking about the way in which if you spend all your time scrolling, you don't anchor anything, because you don't, and also just being able to sleep, or just being able to sit and not be taking in new information all the time. Dreaming, which is part of our theme tonight, but dreaming is incredibly important, as everyone knows who's been sleep deprived, for like you need it for memory building. If you don't sleep and let yourself dream, even if you don't remember the dreams, your brain breaks down.
Inside Out did a really good job of illustrating that in that movie, because every night while the main character slept, these little creatures would run around her brain, sweeping all the excess memories, excess input, that just sweep them out if they didn't matter. And they would categorize the different memories and emotions. Yeah, but your brain does work very much like that. I think the dreams definitely do.
I was talking with my husband out Inside Out yesterday, because I was the little red one.
Oh yeah.
It's like Inside Out is an interesting movie, because I think in a lot of ways they did dramatize that feeling of self in very interesting ways. There were other things I remember that I was worried about with it, but that sense of, I like that, that sense of, if you don't let yourself have that dream time, everything just stays unmemorable. You can't, that's what the people are responding to being on the internet now, is that there's no structure in anything that they encounter, and so they're like terrified constantly. because then
Yeah,
nothing connects to anything else.
that makes sense. That makes sense to me. I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that if you don't dream, you would just go insane with all of the information in your head, it's trying to make sense of everything you've taken in. Now, so what happens if you're taking too much in
And
all the
especially if you're
time?
taking it in through all of the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. The scrolling, like the constant scrolling.
So
And
so
your mind can
River
barely.
Run is saying, great quality tonight. Love Casey's snowball. So we we
I snowball.
have we finally achieved tech clarity,
We'll
right?
see.
So that we have made this easier for you all to dream with. I don't know, suppose. She's saying she just finished Sandman. We do not recommend reading Sandman, but that's something I haven't read, so I don't know what to do with that. Um, dream. She said, dreams likewise, death make life worth living and meaningful. Well, there's some way in which all of this has to connect together, right? And that we know. Um, so the ancients had, as we are talking about a dream tonight, different ideas of what the significance of dreams were, and in fact, one of the things that comes out of the text, which I'm not going to tell you yet what it is, um, but that if we're talking about dreams, and I do think this matters because I think a lot of people, I was not until this past week actively worried about spending quite so much time on the internet, scrolling around, because I was seeing it as I mean, maybe I was deluding myself, right? But seeing it as a way of collecting materials for us, right? It's like, oh, I need, story tells self. I need to be on the internet, scrolling around in the different Telegram channels and checking out X and seeing what people are saying on Facebook and dipping. I only dip into Gab every so often. I'm not really they're very present on that one. Dip in here, dip in there. I need to be collecting all these things because I'm the spider sitting in the middle of all of it. Um, but I had been noticing over the last, I mean, I guess since we've been writing, but it's also the problem of the post-COVID intensity of everybody's engagement online,
Mm.
that I can't remember stuff. Specifically, I can't remember. I used to, before COVID and before this dream time started, I used to be really, really, really good at keeping things in order chronologically. I could date anything, right? I could remember. I mean, it's a sort of Dorothy Sayers little exercise in one of her stories when Peter Wimsey is demonstrating that if you follow the right paths and you're thinking about a particular moment, you can remember things very, very vividly on a particular day at a particular time. It's in his murder investigation, so it's
Mm.
that. But that I used to be able to put myself very clearly in time, and I haven't been able to for the last few years. I get lost. I have no idea how long ago stuff was.
That's funny. I just thought of a very long time ago, like 30 years ago. I took an improvisation class just for fun, and when you got in the zone and you were just making things up on the spot constantly, if somebody just gave you a quick prompt and you would just go through it for a couple of minutes, and sometimes it would hit and sometimes it wouldn't, and and sometimes people would come up to you and say, "That was just hilarious. What can you say that again?" I'm like, "Is that great? Say what?"
So cool. And that's
Couldn't remember
really
anything.
topical.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, and this, I mean, it's like, it's fun that I am recording tonight, right? Am I? That we're recording these things because we're doing improv now, right? It's basically
Mhm.
improv. Teaching for me, my improv is my necklace is getting caught. Teaching for me is a kind of, it's like you set up a problem, you set up a situation, like in improv, right? I like that you did that. I didn't know that before. You didn't had told me.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
excellent. No,
a
the thing
couple.
is, it's really important because I'm an enormous fan of Keith Johnson's improv book as
Hmm.
a way of thinking about all sorts of interactions, including running classes, right? Because like
Okay, yeah, that
you
makes
have
sense.
right, and I actually that you've practiced it makes sense of why we're able to do this, right? I throw something out to you, you say yes, right?
I'm just a big mouth, really. It's not the improv training. I didn't
You're
do all
good
my
at it.
pregnant.
Take the win.
I just never shut up. That's my superpower.
But But what you say about that flow state, like that you're in the flow, you're in the
Yeah,
intensity of the attention, and the flow in this situation is with each other, right? But of course, that what you've just described, I had not put it to, I'd not thought about that way. It's like what people want in the internet interactions is that feeling of intense improv flow.
yeah, spontaneity, right? And yeah, lots of times, as we all know, spend any time on the internet, on any of the social platforms, there are a lot of people who have explosive emotional reactions to things,
Mm.
but there's just as many people who have these, and that's why I love it, these really odd, unique intellectual takes on things that don't necessarily ground in anything, but they're just interesting thoughts. And there are also some very natural comedians out there, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's very entertaining. I do spend way too much time on it,
Well, as
especially the
long as
past
you can
week.
pretend to yourself that you're taking notes for our poetry, that's
Yeah,
one thing.
yeah, like
Um, but
nah, nah.
well, in any case, this layering in dream time of what we can know and what we can't know, and what's real and what's old and what's new, right? Sanjuro is asking, are there any deeply Catholic writers from any area that write about dreams in any way, perhaps medieval or in a mystic way? I'm glad you
Hmm.
asked. We're here there now. Um, Riverrun says, "Oh, your web collected a network of real friends. I am really happy about that. Casey is the best wingman. So there you go.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
see. Okay, so this is the meta level we're here is we're trying to understand the tradition. We're also trying to understand our current environment. And it's interesting the way these two things are coming together, which is what's happened with our sense in the Mosaic Ark of living in this digitally recovered medieval, right? Which is why we're doing the discarded image, because we think will help us make sense of some of the phenomenon we're experiencing in the internet, because it's like tying back in there. But there's also this problem, which is what my monologue at the beginning was. Should I keep doing monologues? Yes, no. Say in the chat.
It was a good one. I'm a fan.
It's a little refresher of a monologue. Um, that seeing things that are in fact being generated in these conversations which have no roots in reality, right? That they live solely in the internet conversation, which is a little bit like sometimes do you feel like when you're looking at the medieval internet of books, as Lewis described for us, the internet of books that lives in the books, right? That they're generating realities that don't ground either, right? So everything we're doing here is paralleling the medieval that we're also trying to explain. But in our mode tonight, one of the things that we're talking about is a dream, and one of the interesting things about it is it generated commentary, and in the commentary on this dream, there's a discussion of types of dreams, right? Which Lewis points to for us. So he's saying uh, in the medieval understanding, or in Macrobius's understanding, which is the commentator who I'll get to. See, if I actually talk elusively, so you have no idea who I'm talking about, and I didn't introduce our characters properly, you're basically in the problem that you are constantly on the internet, because you never know whether you can trust what you're hearing about, because you've never heard of these people before.
Yeah.
Haha. I will introduce them properly, but just a second. Anyway, our commentator, who's Macrobius, um, derives his schema about what kinds of dreams there are from the Anairo Critica of Artemidorus, the 1st century AD. So we're already in one of these trains of tradition, right? Macrobius commenting on Cicero, commenting, blah, blah. Anyway, they're all coming out. And he says there are 5 different species of dreams, 3 truthful, vertical, and 2 which have no divination in them, right? Because in antiquity, they have some idea that sometimes dreams come from outside us and can point us to messages, right? So the first kind is the somnium, which is what the title of our text is for tonight. This shows us truths veiled in an allegorical form. Pharaoh's dream of the fat and lean kine would be a specimen. Referent there? Pharaoh's dream?
Yeah.
Where does it come from?
Pharaoh's, well, Pharaoh's dream was given to uh, Jacob, right? No, sorry, Joseph. Who am I thinking of?
See,
Yeah,
Lewis does
sorry.
this to you
Same name.
constantly. I still do not recommend this as an introduction because if you don't know what he's talking about, you'll get none of his references. He
Well,
thinks
it's that interesting though, because it was a good introduction for students in the 1960s, but in the 2020s, no. We have to be even more specific. Yeah.
you have, I mean, you could feel like he's giving you this esoteric occult knowledge because you have no idea what he's just referenced. Pharaoh's
Right.
dream of
Just
the fat and lean kine would be a
right.
specimen. Maybe that's some kind of occult, divinatory thing. Well, yes, it's what the Pharaoh asked
I
Joseph
know.
to interpret for him.
Right.
See,
The
Donny
dream was
Osmond.
given to right.
Yeah.
Exactly. The dream was given to Pharaoh by God so that Joseph could interpret it
Okay,
for
so is
him.
dream interpretation pagan or Christian? Oh, wait.
Both.
Trick question, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So every allegorical dream poem in the Middle Ages records a feigned somnium. Nearly all dreams are assumed to be somnia by modern psychologists. Interesting claim. And the somnium is the dream in Chaucer's House of Fame. So in that sense, it's allegorical, right? Truth. The somnium shows us truths veiled in allegorical form, and that most people now think of dreams through the Freudian lens of they're symbolic, right? So if you have a dream, it's a symbolic showing.
So what is the difference between symbolism and allegory?
Oh dear, you did it. Okay. Well, according
Look,
to
I never shut up.
the simplest way is saying, but Lewis wrote a whole book called The Allegory of Love, and what he's showing there is texts that make personifications. And there's also an excellent book on allegory by Angus Fletcher. And in their case, what they're talking about is allegory as a particular literary form which makes abstractions, gives personifications to abstractions. For example, the Psychomachia, the Battle of the Psyche, in which the virtues and vices battle it out as characters, right? Like in the tarot cards, you will see some of these characters rendered as strength and temperance and justice, right? And they're given female form, which is the normal
Right.
way of having an allegorical figure of those abstractions.
That was very Greek.
And Tolkien says he cordially disliked allegory in all its form and much preferred history, true or feigned, right? It's like, what do you mean? How can history be true or feigned? He mainly means just he likes stories and not having characters that have that personification quality. So we don't say that any of the characters in The Lord of the Rings, for example, are an allegory of Christ, because none of those characters are meant to be personifications of Christ or of any particular virtues or something like that. They're their own characters who have traits that, and some of them, they may be driven more by a virtue or a vice or mercy, pity, things like that. But there's no character that plays that role. Whereas, for example, in the Narnia stories, Aslan does seem to be an allegorical representation of Christ.
Yeah, super obvious. Yeah.
Symbolism in that sense it's an old term for allegory, symbolein, throwing together. But in the 19th and early 20th centuries, it takes on the character that most people have it now, that symbols have this more Jungian, they're not archetypes, but they have this more, and I get this from Henry Adams when he's talking in the Education of Henry Adams, talking about the Virgin and the dynamo, and he talks about the Virgin as symbol, and saying, as woman, she has force, she has driving. That in the late 19th, early 20th century, there's a symbolist movement that makes symbol into something that is more of a mystical agent, I think. And medieval allegory never had that character. They don't think of allegories of justice as symbols in that sense. So they're different. You want the next layer?
Yes, please.
You better say yes. No, then that blocks the improv. Okay, so the problem is that in scriptural commentary, there's a historical mode, which is what the text actually says, but it could also be the story. So there's the allegory, the history. The allegory can show things like the truth of Christ. And reading the Psalms, for example, you can say historically they're written by David. Allegorically, they show the relationship between Christ and the church. And yet, as I'm working on this paper on Francis still, in truth, the Psalms are also read as the voice of Christ, which is how Francis uses them, for example, in the description of what happens on the cross. Because you have Psalm 21 or Psalm 68 being the thing that Jesus, as Christ, actually said from the cross. And a lot of iconography comes out of that in the later Middle Ages. So these are complicated realities that we can activate with language, right? And I think a lot with my monologuing about whether or not Lewis and company are occultists, one of the things that makes all this difficult is they're literary critics writing in the early 20th century who are fascinated with this power of language and what it means. And they've got a variety of things that they're doing, both in their friend Owen Barfield, thinking about sort of the origin of Tolkien and Barfield are very interested in the origin of language and where it comes out of and how it comes out of our experience. And when Barfield talks, for example, about how, back at the beginning of things, the word spiritus meant both spirit and breath and wind. And they only become metaphorical later when language becomes more abstract and such. But back in the day, it was actually all really concrete. And so when Tolkien names his god of, or his being, his Vala, the Vala, Manwe as the wind, right? Is he breath? Is he spirit? Is he wind? Well, he's sort of all of them. And that is a clear evidence that Tolkien had been sort of reading Barfield and talking to him about it. So this power that we have of storytelling and language, and then with dreams, what this is getting into with the, in modern psychology, the symbols or the allegories that you see in the things that happen in your dreams are both general, right? Freud famous. The thing is, Freud never really made a book of like X equals Z, right? It's like I think he usually riffed, free associated off of what he thought they were, because it seems like the explanations change, but they can be both general consciousness, like what Jung tried to do with the archetypes, or they can be particular to you, right? So.
Okay, so symbols are more of an association.
So symboline in Greek just means thrown together, right? Sim together, bowl,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense,
the allegory will be a lot more complex.
The problem is that these are not terms that have ever been used with. I mean, we'll find out. Scientific precision, what's that, right? It's trying to make technical language out of poetic understanding is very complicated. Okay. And that's what you might, I mean, Barfield in his poetic diction is actually trying to do this, show how language started from this kind of everything working together mode and has split off into fractured understanding. And his idea of recovering the ancient understanding is to recombine them.
Okay.
Now, it's perfectly possible for people to start thinking that sounds like making magic spells, but then you are thinking in terms of language as having what kind of power does language actually have, which is, of course, one of the big debates we're having right now, right?
Yeah, it has a lot of power for evil, for sure.
And how, right? It's like exactly what kind of evil comes out of a spoken phrase. People imagine it. They want it to be like Harry Potter, defense against the dark arts spells, right? It's like I say this thing and it happens. But, as far as we know, that's not real. Right? And
Yeah, I hope not.
But people seem to want it to be, right? It's like, I call
No, they
you
always
this and
want to
therefore
be,
you become that. You're a toad. You're a Nazi, right? And if I turn you
right?
into a toad, I can do what I do to toads or Nazis.
It is very ironic they're using Goebbels' own playbook to make these words magic by repetition,
Mm-hmm.
right? The accusation, just keep repeating it, repeating it, repeating it until people don't question it anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Then somebody acts on it, and you go, "Well, what can you expect?"
They were
Right?
hypnotized. They were, no, and this, I mean, so this is interesting. It's like nobody, our ability to talk about the power that language has is so impoverished right now. I mean, the last great thing that I was aware of that um, dealt with the level of, the sort of the visceral quality of language was Lakoff and Johnson's study of metaphors we live by, when they started realizing that all of our language is metaphorical in the sense that it draws on our experience as bodies. So
Mm.
things like our movement in space and our experience of having being a container, right? You can eat and things go in, things come out. And that you start they started with an idea of realizing language was all about was conduits, right? We talk about putting things in words, right? So words become these containers for, you put the thing in the
Yes.
words and it carries things. And that they did some wonderful, breakdowns of ordinary English, showing how all of it's metaphorical, right? You're aware of some of the surface ones that are more um I know conceptual. I know which we're aware of some of the metaphors sometimes. We're aware of ones that are no longer active and they feel sort of dead, right? Fake. But a lot of the metaphors that we use are invisible to us in the structure of the language, and they worked and thought about that. I'm not I'm not in conversation with people that are looking at language as much right now, but I'm not aware of a revival of really thinking about how language works on us.
I'm sure some people are looking at it.
Well, they're
Um,
called advertisers for sure.
yeah, right. There's all kinds of things that can be advertised, not just things for sale.
Oh,
Sometimes
all
it's an
things.
ideology,
All
right? Or
things.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's all rhetoric. It's rhetoric all the way through.
yeah.
Um, okay, everybody's just listening. Tolkien nailed it among a number of other things. His mother's love was strong. Yes, yes, we were right. Okay, so we're doing what
Mhm.
we'd actually planned. We actually had planned to do this as a commentary on this text, but we're never getting to the text. This is like a medieval commentary. When are we
It's good
actually going to
text.
get to the text? All right. We did promise we're about a dream, right? So we're talking about dreams and the experience of dreams, and we've just worked through the surface level of dream is somnium, which is truth veiled in an allegorical form. Okay. Another kind of dream that they recognize in antiquity is the visio. Um, Lewis, this is a direct, literal prevision of the future. Mr. Dunn's experiment with time is mainly about visiones. This type appears as a vision in Chaucer, Op. Cit. 1:7. Okay, that's a great piece of example. That's a great example of who's Mr. Dunn. Lewis doesn't tell you because these are his lecture notes. He knows who Mr. Dunn is. He and
Huh.
Tolkien all knew who Mr. Dunn is, and there's some very interesting um, insights into what Tolkien does with dreams in The Lord of the Rings that Verlyn Flieger shows in her. Um, oh golly, it's Dunn is the Experiment with Time. What's her book called? I talk about it in some of the Forge of Tolkien videos where Dunn was whether he's a mystic or an engineer, he claimed to be an engineer, and he claimed to have been doing these experiments with predictive dreams. And I mean, like that he prevision, right? That he would
Mhm.
see something in a dream and then it would happen, right?
What
So
year was he writing?
like in the 30s.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's right on schedule from what happened in the 20th century, especially the Soviets. But anyway,
How so?
oh, they experimented with that kind of stuff all the time, with the precognition and yeah.
Right, yeah. And Dunn's book was, I mean, so you can see things in Lord of the Rings where um they have dreams, particularly in Tom Bombadil's house, and the hobbits all dream different things. Frodo seems to have a dream that he sees Gandalf walking about on a tower, and if you do the tracking to figure out what exactly chronologically is happening with the different characters, you realize he's able to see Gandalf before it happens. I've forgotten exactly what the temporality is, but um, they were very interested in this idea that Dunn presented as a scientific experiment, right? It's got charts and diagrams and everything, that it's a kind of exercise in expanding your attention. And they mean it, I mean, they mean it sci-fi level. They don't mean it like occult, magic level. They mean it, this is this technical experiment thing that you can do.
What's the difference? Sci-fi and occult. What is the difference? They were both speculating on what was possible.
I think it's all alchemy. Well, no, I mean, this is what's the difference between the sci-fi, the sci-fi and the occult? Well, indeed, right? It's like it's interesting that some people, oh, well, if it's science, that's dealing with reality, right? That's hard, real stuff, right? That's the science stuff. Whereas the occult stuff, oh, that's the nonsense. But oh, right, but you may actually it's totally nonsense, but you may actually also get demons, which aren't scientific, right? Putting things in the right baskets for your your this is good, this is bad. This is simply science and experimentally proven. This is mystical woo-woo, and we won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Guess what? You're going to have a hard time finding the the line that passes through the human heart on that one. Because literally everybody that you've ever heard of that dabbled in either of those was both. I stand by that. I bet. Here's my challenge, right? What should we do? See if you can find someone who's scientific and doesn't play occult games.
What is an occult game?
Well, this kind of thing: action at a distance, the ether, gravity, absolute space, time. No, it's exactly this. My little monologue was actually, it's like this deciding what counts as pagan and what counts as Christian, what counts as Jewish, right? There's all this stuff out there now. The Kabbalah is this, that, and the other, and
yeah,
right. Okay, so the occult and the scientific are treacherously difficult to disentangle, and of course, all the guys that are doing quantum physics now. I just saw my alumni mag had a big, a picture of a giant engine that they're going to build to, study particles. And it's like, particles? What do you mean particles? You're going to study some reaction that you think proves that there's a particle out there. Give me a break. Wizards. Wizards. You're wizards. You're a lot of you. Okay.
Found the God particle already. Anyway.
Well, anyway, the Mr. Dunn's experiment with time is an interesting example of this problem, because if you read, you can get the book out there. It's out there in Hathi Trust or whatever, and I've talked about it in several of at least one of my Forge of Tolkien's. The guys reading it in Oxford in the 30s were really interested in it because they felt it was like technical proof of this prevision. And Lewis sits here and just says, Mr. Dunn's experiment with time, direct literal prevision of the future, seeing the future. Okay, number 3, oraculum. In this, one of the dreamer's parents or some other grave and venerable person appears and openly declares the future or gives advice. Such dreams are Chaucer's oracles. So the Somnium that we're going to talk about tonight has characters of all 3 of these, interestingly, in the sense that it's meant to be scientific, but also in one of the characters in it is talking to another character who's meant to be seen his dead relative, right? So whether it's like and there's a prediction of the future too. So we could have all of these. So apparently these you can distinguish them, but they also have overlaps. And then, according to the ancients, the useless kinds of dreams are insomnium. So insomnia. This merely repeats working preoccupations. The carter dreameth how his carts go, as Chaucer says. So apparently, I guess a lot of our dreams would be just insomnia, because you're fretting about stuff, and there's no
Yeah.
truth in it. It's just anxiety.
Well, it's truth about your anxiety,
Right.
or proof of it.
Okay. John Abrisi says, okay, I get the theme of today's chat now. I said it was dreaming in the title. Interesting. Perhaps it links to my edition of Jack Bushman's short stories. Here's an excerpt. Okay, John, you're going to have to make proper comments on the recording, because I think these don't stick around. A regular literary device used by Jack Bushman is the dream vision or dream allegory. Yeah, and it's coming straight out of this long tradition, for sure. First developed in the Middle Ages and resurrected during the Romantic era. Well, the thing is, it's used in the Middle Ages because of the text that we're eventually going to get to here. If you
Yeah, it
stick
goes
with
way
us.
back.
Yeah, but it goes to this. It's in the Middle Ages. It's very much because of this text, the Somnium Scipionis. And that's what Lewis is in effect doing when he's saying Chaucer does this, Chaucer does this, Chaucer does this, right? It's like it's one of those, everybody knows this text, and so if you're going to find themes that keep coming up in medieval literature, this is part of the discarded image point, that it's so ground into their imagination. It just it's like it's everywhere, and this dream thing is one of them. So insomnia, and then the fifth kind and the second kind that's useless is visum. This occurs when not yet fully asleep and believing ourselves to be still awake, we see shapes rushing towards us or flitting hither and thither. So I guess hallucinations.
That is a thing. It has a different name than hallucination. I just watched something about that, but yeah, that's a phenomena. That's a half dream, half sleep state phenomena that some people experience.
Yeah, they're very frightening as far as I hear. And he says epialtes or nightmares included in this class. So they're terrifying.
I mean, I've had them, mild ones that weren't terrifying. They were just a little bit scary. But the ones that were used as the examples in the video I was watching was, like you're paralyzed and there's somebody in the room with you. I mean, that's terrifying. I don't know how you get over that. Probably need a prescription for something. But yeah,
I've had a few like that, right? That you think you're awake, but you can't move.
I've gotten up, jumped up out of my bed, flipped on the light, looking for the spider that was descending from my ceiling directly on top of me. Of course, was there, right? But it took me a couple of minutes to fully wake up and realize that I had dreamt it, because I'd opened my eyes and seen it.
Wow. So okay. So that's this one.
Yeah.
That's all right. So what we're the phenomenon the phenomenon is complicated. Clearly our dreams are complicated. We've said we need to have them, otherwise we go nuts. And yet relying on them too much is treacherous, because they could be misleading, which is an interesting problem. So here we are, dreaming the internet, right? Now, any questions? That's part one of tonight's discussion, is the phenomenon of dreams and how they match into our problem of how can we get accurate knowledge anymore, right? Where do we get truth? And because the truth is layered into our experience with, in fact, tracing tradition. I mean, this is I was interested in and sorry to see these discussions of Lewis, which may have some merit. Lewis did have different kinds of mythological thinking than Tolkien did. I grant that, but this fear, there's a massive fear out there right now of being able to tell, in my categories, pagan and Christian and Jew, medieval and modern. What's my other one?
I think
Catholic and Protestant, right? It's like, which and if Lewis has been, by way of the current conversation on the internet dropped into the bucket of not Christian, pagan, not even just Protestant, just terrifying, right? Suddenly, the the book that we were using just as a frame for like pointing out the difficulties of all of this thing is itself now complicated.
It's that people are currently quite panicked almost. I wouldn't, it's not satanic panic level, but on social media, they will talk about who was in the occult, who wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people on Substack will write about this. And I think they're rather alarmist about it. In the 20th century, in the early 20th century, people were talking about the occult. That's a holdover from the 19th century. But then they started experimenting and looking at it scientifically, as you just pointed out. And a lot of people had a passing curiosity about it or interest in it. That doesn't mean they were worshiping Baphomet. I think that's quite a leap.
And that is the leap that this particular conversation has made. But it's this the question of, I think the point about Lewis's discarded image generally is we don't understand this literature anymore because it's grounded in a different worldview.
That too, but even that's kind of related to what I just said, though.
Yeah. No, I agree.
The 20th century is not today. And so when you see people mentioning things like this, you automatically assume it has pre-degenerated to today's level where people would be doing these kinds of things. We're just openly practicing witchcraft and such. That wasn't the case necessarily in the early 20th century. And I wouldn't assume it.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, they actually, I mean, Crowley definitely was.
No, there were some people, but not everybody. And the assumption now is that anybody who had a passing interest in it or read about it, even from a scientific perspective, must have been another Aleister Crowley, and that's not necessarily the case.
Right, but that's the problem of the discernment of knowing, like what kind of knowledge is permitted, what kind of knowledge is truthful. How do we have access to the truth when everything seems to be, sent to us through these? I mean, it's mediated in the quite literal, McLuhan sense of here we are in this media environment. And then you realize it's mediated also by, well, Lewis, one of the things I see with the 19th century, everybody needs to read Ronald Hutton's book on the Triumph of the Moon and on the actual modern witchcraft stuff. Because you'll find that a lot of the things that you think are medieval that go back in the tradition, they're completely invented in the 19th century. Yeah. And Hutton, who's a very, very excellent scholar of early modern England and Tudor Stuart and pagan religions, and shows you, Hutton is brilliant because he's actually able to track concretely, doing good history, through where all of these things come from, and it's projected onto the Middle Ages constantly, which is one because it's projected onto Catholicism, and if it's woo mystical scary mass stuff, it must be a black mass because there's no such thing as Christ's mass, right? And I did find this tendency frustrating. It's like, well, Tolkien was clearly he's the most devout Catholic you could possibly find. And
it's quite a slander.
It's enormous slander.
It's just really horrible. Yeah. It's almost as if people don't want it to be true that he was a devout Catholic. So we're going to retroactively assign him some kind of occult status, which is just dumb.
Oh, yes, to the point of saying, the Lord of the Rings, witches use it, you should burn it, right? So this is a challenge.
Witches use it. Okay, this is my wedding ring. Symbolic of anything. I must be a witch. Yeah.
Well, okay, but disentangling all of this is challenging, and is going to continue to be challenging the further we go into all of these discarded image layers of things. For example, here we go. Here we got our images tonight, right? The image of the cosmos that they're working with. Now we are actually going to do a proper close discussion of our primary text tonight, which is the Dream of Scipio, that was included in the sixth book of Cicero's On the Republic. Now, in other news, I just read a very interesting Substack article about what a bad guy Cicero was. Evident, not maybe in this text, not for the reasons of this, but Cicero
talking about him this long after.
Well, Yes, because Cicero, I mean, one, we're still talking about him because he
Yeah.
was, the great orator and the great writer, but he's the spin doctor of the day. That's literally what he did. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
he was
like,
the orator, right?
well, he's quite blunt about it in his books on rhetoric, right? And you set up
Hmm.
your narrative, and you're going to first capture the goodwill of your audience, and then create the narrative that is going to persuade them to your side. And of course, we have examples of his persuasive speech and things like Cataline orations and things like that, where he managed to I don't know whether it's at this level, right? But there's the Cataline conspiracy. Did he completely invent a conspiracy to have a bunch of his political enemies, murdered? Who knows? Possibly. He was on the side of the oligarchs in the Senate and the senators who wanted to preserve the republic. Sound familiar?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Right.
Yes.
And
Our
our
democracy,
democracy, and
not yours, ours.
never forget
Yeah.
saying it's the next Hitler, right? It's the next Caesar.
Wait a minute. Which one?
Any of them. They're the emperor. Right? So as we're reading Cicero's, dream of Scipio from the Somnium Scipionis, which is only preserved not because Cicero's full Republic apparently is largely lost, but this dream is preserved because it was made a subject of a commentary by Macrobius in the fourth or fifth century, right? And Macrobius, it's like I think Lewis actually gave a Macrobius is one of these threshold characters because it's a little unclear what he is. Lewis says Macrobius lived at the end of the fourth and the beginning of the fifth century. His religion also has been doubted, but there seems no solid reason for supposing that it was other than paganism. He belonged, however, to a circle in which Christian and pagan could freely mingle. The Christian Albinus and that great pagan champion, the elder Symmachus, were among his friends. And what we have two of his works, one the Saturnalia, the other this commentary on the Somnium Scipionis, and it's because he did a commentary on this text from Cicero's Republic that we actually have the full text. Apparently Cicero's Republic doesn't survive, and that the Macrobius's commentary on the Dream of Scipio by Cicero was so popular in the Middle Ages. We have like at least 50 manuscripts of it, which is a lot. But what Lewis is also pointing to and saying this is one of the seminal texts, right? It's one of the critical texts for creating this literary imagination of the Middle Ages. Everybody knew Macrobius's setup and use it, as Lewis is constantly showing you, in their. I mean, it's the same way we in Draco Chemicus are using things about the meanings of the metals or the geography of things. It's like you Chaucer puts these kinds of technical details into his poetry for his characters knowing certain kinds of things, right? So I got a little detrained there. You could on the one hand you could want to trust this, right? Because it's Cicero and it's Macrobius the pagan commenting on Cicero, but the next turtle down is when you can trust Cicero about anything, including the main characters that he puts in this dream. So it's interesting because it's the dream of Scipio, but the Scipio in this dream is, of course, the younger Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus, the adopted grandson of the narrator of the dream, or the adopted grandson, grandfather. They're both named Publius Scipio Africanus. The older one is the one who conquered Hannibal, and the younger one is the one who talks to his grandfather in the dream. And they're called Africanus because, of course, they are the Scipios who are the great destroyers of Carthage, which may ring bells for some of those in this particular community of conspiracy hunters, right? Because these are the guys that made sure Carthage was destroyed.
Yes.
And fought Caesar. Wait, well, Cicero did. I mean, they're so mad at Cicero when the senatorial party is overthrown that not only is he beheaded, not only do they cut his hands off, but they stick both on the rostrum in the forum, and yeah, there's one of the women, the I forget who's who. This is Octavian has Cicero killed, and this talk about political enemies, right? um, one of the women comes and like stabs him in the tongue, his head. He stabs her in the tongue, saying,
Wow.
"This is because of your speech." So,
Mm.
if you guys, we should go back to Roman tradition. Think this through.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds an awful lot like British tradition too. Well, not British, English. Middle Ages, they would do similar things.
Okay, that I don't know what you're thinking about.
Well, as far as when someone, well, certain people when they were executed, yeah, their head was displayed.
Yes, famous Simon de Montfort is displayed in pieces after his revolt against Henry III. That's
Thomas
the most.
More was also.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And so later was Cromwell, but they actually dug his corpse up and displayed him.
Excellent point. Two of those are early modern, not medieval.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway, we're in this kind of wild world of who are the main characters? Who are you going to side with? The dog is announcing.
We're going to side with the dog. We always side with the dog.
We always side with the dog. And recognizing that the reason we have this text. Kiddo, please stop it. Drake, come here. Come. No, I know. Do you want to be on camera? You can't be. You're not tall enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, he hears something.
It's usually just squirrels.
It's the ghost of Cicero.
It's well played. Yes. Well, I can't get up because I'm kind of trapped in my pod here, and I have nothing to throw at him or anything. So you guys just have to deal with the dog.
Just say shoo, Cicero, shoo.
Shoo, Cicero, shoo. It's Cicero's ghost coming to defend himself against the calumny of saying he's actually the rabble roused. He's actually the problem. No, he's he's of the senatorial oligarchy that is nervous about Caesar's popularity with the people. And so there's so many parallels. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we think about that in terms of the setup for the dream and who are the characters in it and the kinds of claims that they're making, the interesting Drake, stop it. Please come here. Please come here. Come on. Now, stay with me. Sit. Yes, you're going to stay quiet. No, you're going to stay quiet. I can't concentrate if you're doing that. Please stop it. No. Stop it. Excuse me. Please.
Take your time.
I can't do anything. I'm trapped. Stop it. No, you don't need to go outside. Okay, just shh. I don't have any treats. We've never had quite this problem. We're clearly tapping into the energies.
I think so.
Okay. He's growling at something. This is okay. I don't even want to think about what we might be tapping into. What is the chat saying? Is the doggy's name Drake? Yes, the doggy's name is Drake.
Yes. No, she has a pet dragon.
I have a pet dragon. He's a corgi. Therefore, he deserves to be a pet dragon because he's a Welsh red dragon.
Ooh,
Cromwell.
Nice.
Oh, this is good. Sandro says Cromwell, one of Melkor's ring wraiths. Ooh, I like it. I like it. Caesar is so before cool. Cat in a box. Okay, that's cool. Anyway, I forgot what we were talking about. I'm trying to set up how Cicero may be an unreliable source. Macrobius is an interesting level of commentator because his commentary is going to do, which we're not going to really get into deeply right now, but all sorts of Neoplatonic stuff. But because of Macrobius's commentary, these topics are current, and this is quite a long list, but I think if you listen to it, you'll realize how much of the medieval imagination this one text is responsible for. So the following list of the more popular topics discussed in the commentary will make clear to anyone who has browsed in medieval literature why this work had such a wide appeal. This is the William Harris Stell's introduction to his translation. And this is the commentary of Macrobius on the Scipio, dream of Scipio. Okay, a classification of dreams, which we've demonstrated, right? And we could do, the thing is, we could do conversation on all of these. If you guys want us to talk through the commentary on the dream of Scipio, there's more material, right?
The commentary looks way longer than the actual dream.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of this is footnotes, but
yeah. I mean, the dream is like 10 pages.
Right, the dream is like 10 pages. The commentary is, in the translation, it goes from page 81 to 246.
Wow.
So that's the commentary on the 10 pages of the dream.
Isn't that amazing?
Right. Okay, so classification.
It's a really packed 10 pages, so I gotta say, I enjoyed reading it the several times I did.
Happily, we may get to continue it next time. Although yes. everyone, next time we don't have a stream on Friday, it'll be 2 weeks from now. So anyway, okay, classification of dreams, for which we did, for example, but just in Lewis's summary of it, right? The attributes and abilities of the numbers of the sacred Pythagorean decad. Okay, so you get Pythagorean number theory out of this text. And one of the things is also to think of which of these things do you think of as pagan, which do you think of as Christian, which do you think as modern, which do you think of as ancient, which do you think of as, Catholic, which it's interesting, like certain kinds of things that you are convinced belong to one of those categories may confound you. A classification of the virtues. Philosophers' views on the boundary of the infernal realm of change and decay, and on the nature of the soul. The steps by which the soul descends from its celestial origin to human bodies. Didn't expect that, did you? The Neoplatonic hypostases and man's endowment therefrom with intellect, sense perception, and growth. So there's a whole psychology and cognitive science in here. How man differs from animals in the vegetable kingdom. The motions of the celestial sphere and planets. The order of the planetary spheres. The method of determining the relative sizes of the sun and earth. The method first used in marking off the signs of the zodiac. The proof that the earth is in the center of the universe. The account of Pythagoras' discovery of the numerical ratios of the musical concords and their physical explanation. The numerical ratios, planetary distances, the explanation of the origin of the harmony of the spheres, the location of the 4 inhabited quarters of the globe, and the impossibility of intercommunication, the equatorial and meridional oceans and the causes of the tides, the duration of the world year, the doctrines of Plato on the immortality of the soul, and the refutation of Aristotelian views. All of that in this book. Packed, right? And the thing, it's about the soul, it's about the human person and our constitution, it's about, the reality of what's changeable and what's permanent, the cosmology, design. It's mathematical, it's about music, it's everything, like one textbook, right? So it
is. It's like that's everything, yeah, because everything else is related to those things.
Well, because of the popularity of Macrobius' commentary on Scipio, on Cicero's text, they become associated, right? It's like you don't have a cosmology, a science of, like, here I'm showing you the image. This is from the Liber Floridus of Lambert of Saint-Omer from the 12th century. The Macrobian planetarium. And then the circles of the spheres, right? And then the next image I have is these zones, which is very important for arguing about whether or not you can get from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, because there's this band of fire between the two of them. But
Yes.
this both cosmology and geography is bound together in their imagination by this study, which is also bound up with music and is bound up with number theory and is bound up with psychology and is bound up with, what else did I talk about? Um, uh, I mean, what with dreams, right? But the sort of our ability to reason and understand, it ends up, everything ends up in this commentary, and
Right.
that essential reality is what, just at surface level, I wanted us to show you with the talking about the discarded image, is saying in medieval understanding they relate everything to everything else.
Right.
It
And theology also is the undercurrent that flows through all of this too, I think, because it's about the origin of man and its destination.
Right. Yes. I mean, the immortality of the soul, right?
Hmm.
Some of these things I saw someone on Twitter, one of the Catholic theologians who, I think Phaser, I don't remember who was saying it, but saying something like people make this argument about, rights or something like that, and saying, and they make it as if it's a Christian argument, but it's actually Kant, right? That
Hmm.
there's varieties of arguments. For example, I've been thinking about this with natural law, right? And that,
Hmm.
bodies and organisms have their appropriate end. That's not Christian. That's Aristotle, right? It's
Right.
a telos. It's the final cause, and that you think of it as. I mean, it's traditional, but is it pagan or Christian? Well, disentangling from antiquity what counts as the Hellenistic world from what Jesus said, with just disentangling that from what the Hebrew religion had, disentangling the Hebrew religion from the Egyptian religion because I spent so much time there. Right? It's
Hmm.
exactly, where are you going to draw your nice little border between, good metaphor. Here's a, I don't know, this is not symbol. I like metaphors, right? Because they're grounded and embodied. The difference between the changeable and unchangeable, right? The celestial and the sublunary. All of this from, for example, the Chronicles of Narnia, because Tolkien, Lewis put this kind of thing into the stories. For example, in The Silver Chair, the kids go underground and the witch tries to deceive them by telling them the lamp is actually the sun. The silver
Hmm.
is the metal of the moon, and the sublunary feeling of being as we are in the internet, deceived and changeable, and you can't tell what anything is true or not, and it's all, reflections and mystifications and changeability. That's one of the things that Macrobius's commentary talks about, of the realm which is not invented by Cicero. Cicero is simply straight up channeling the Greek philosophers. Um, that the medieval understanding has this conviction that the the world of change is below the orbit of the moon, which goes around the earth, and the
Hmm.
world of perfection is above it. And so when, for example, in the 17th century, they start training telescopes on the moon and see that it's got craters and apparent, you know, it's not perfect and smooth and things like that. And that they then find changeability in the planets. This disturbs a good deal of their sense of what's real, right? Where's the boundary between
Shatters
what
their
I
worldview.
go ahead?
It shatters their worldview.
Completely.
Shattered it.
Consider why everybody goes insane in the 17th century. It's like we've shattered our worldview by having this internet that suddenly, on the one hand, gives us information that we can't trust the source of, and on the other, makes all of us into amateur historians who are desperately
Right.
trying to make all of the connections between everything else and track the story down to the Templars. It always ends in the Templars. Right? Which is usually lies about the Templars, which you guys have convinced yourselves are true, because guess who wanted their money?
Hmm.
Okay. So Sanjuro says, "Hi Drake." Well, he finally went away. Rachel is a corgi stan. I am. Sanjuro, it's all about the dimensions. Indeed, it is. Okay, we can get into the dream a bit now. Don't you guys love these long setups? You will remember this forever if we do this properly. Okay. things that you noticed, my reader. Casey.
Yes, things that I noticed about the dream of Scipio.
Things that you noticed about it to help them think about what kind of
Okay,
text this is.
okay. The entire dream seems to be a concentrated study in, well, everything in existence to these people 2,000 years ago, right? You have the stars, the planets, the earth, man, his place on it, where he came from, where he's going, what his obligations are while he's at his post. He referred to it as his post. Um, Interesting, it was anti-suicide, because I know the Romans did practice that, but it was very anti-suicide.
It's
He said,
very anti-suicide, yeah.
if you do this, because at one point, Africanus says, well, why don't I just go to you right now? If the body is nothing, which is very Manichaean, if the body is nothing, why don't I just go to you right now? And he says, you can't do that. You're abandoning your post. God put you here for a reason. Don't abandon your post. So he was talking to him like a soldier. And I thought, oh, that was actually very nice. I like that. But basically, it's like their entire universe, intellectual and physical, in 10 pages, if you can imagine that.
Yes.
That's my impression of reading this.
So there are interesting things like one, this dream vision stuff, which I think Lewis is pointing this out, that you get thanks to the Somnium Scipionis, you get things like Dante. Doing the dream travel, right? Says where did he say? Yes, so Africanus Major carries Africanus Minor up to a height where he looks down on Carthage from an exalted place, bright and shining, filled with stars. So maybe we should say that, right? So
yes,
it's a layered conversation, right? It's in Cicero's conversation about the Republic, and it's
right. There's also history in there too. I forgot to mention.
Right, and
there's so much in 10 pages.
Well, so when I arrived in Africa in the consulship of Manius Manlius, so the narrator is in fact Scipio the Younger, who ends up in a conversation with the king there. The king, Massinissa, brings up Scipio the Elder, Scipio Africanus, and then Scipio the Younger falls asleep, explaining that he dreams that his grandfather, who's his adopted grandfather, in fact, not his biological grandfather, he dreams that his grandfather, Africanus, is standing there, and this interesting historical detail. He says he recognizes him. Did you catch why he recognizes him?
Yeah, he said, you look just like your picture.
It's not just its portrait mask. What he says is it looks like you look just like your death mask.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's even creepier. Wow. But yeah, they did do that. They still did that until to the 19th century too.
Well, so these senatorial Roman families, they'll have like galleries of these things. They take them when the people die, right? And so you have
yeah.
The Scipio the Younger says he recognizes Scipio the Elder because of his death mask, not because he remembered him, right? He says I recognize his portrait mask. So we have here he's been talking to his grandfather. His grandfather then appears to him in a dream. I mean, it's like it feels like Dickens, right? It's like
you know what I thought? I just happened to think before we went on that they're in the Milky Way, and he said that's explicitly the spirits are up in the Milky Way.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that sounds just like the beginning of It's a Wonderful Life when Clarence is talking to Joseph the angel, and they're in the Milky Way. And one star is talking, and the other star talks back. And I thought, oh, I wonder if he got that idea from this.
He could have, right? And so here's an example of the degree to which it's like, at what point do you say this is our real, whose tradition is it, right? Are we going to eradicate everything from our tradition that isn't in the Bible? Are we going to, and then figuring out what's in the Bible and what's not in the Bible is sometimes something of an exercise, because the Bible sometimes refers to things outside of itself. So do you go there, right? Go to Enoch because Jude mentions it. That like you said, here the angels are in the talking, or the souls are talking in the Milky Way. And if that's a cosmology that they have from antiquity, whose antiquity, right? Do the Hebrews have the
Right.
same cosmology as everybody else? Well, sort of. Yes, probably. But this is the
I think
Greek
they
one.
did.
Cicero is giving you the Greek one, which is interesting because he's got the Afrikaani talking about it.
Right. What is really apparent when you read this is that Cicero is referencing much older
Oh
sources.
yeah.
I mean, he doesn't come out and say this is the reference for this. You just know by the way he's writing it that this is very old knowledge he's using.
It's just true in his, I mean, it's not allegorical in the sense that he thinks it's a symbolic. He's saying these, I
Right.
mean, I think it's a literary dream because he makes this
Hmm.
story about how the narrator has the dream, but the things shown in the dream are meant to be true,
Yes.
not allegories of things.
No, they're meant to be. No, they're meant to be literally true. This is the way the universe is ordered.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so they're in the dream, they're hovering over Carthage, as it were, right, which is what Skip Africanus destroyed. Or I mean, Carthago Delinda Est, that happens in 146, right? So
Mm.
this is supposed to be happening in 149. So it's in 3 more years the dreamer is going to destroy the city.
Mm.
Because, as we all know, because of the Roman version of the story that we have, Carthage is the great enemy that sacrifices and eats babies, right?
Yeah.
Which I sometimes sort of wonder. But
You wonder if it's propaganda?
oh man, right? We've gotten used to it. It's like, talk about if Cicero is not the
Well,
good guy, he's busy making propaganda about
okay,
Caesar.
but I mean, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, though, are they? I mean, people had tried to say that the Spanish were propagandizing the Aztecs and the Mayans, saying they didn't do that. They were just, that was just propaganda. And then they found all these skulls by the
Right,
tens of thousands,
right.
right? So there was archaeological evidence to back it up.
Well, so I mean, this
Hard to say.
continue with our theme of how do you know what's true? How do you know that the Lewis is an occultist and Tolkien is actually Catholic versus they're both Luciferians versus, well, Cicero is the good guy and Caesar is the one who actually wants to destroy everything. No, in fact, it's Cicero that wants. Consider that Cicero's Republic, fits in everybody's imagination as one of the great classical. The thing is, I haven't read the Republic, so I've read his stuff on
Yeah.
oratory more. Right, I've read the rhetorical
Mm.
pieces, and everybody has to suffer through some Cicero in Latin class. And the humanists in the 15th century decided they want to write like Cicero because they want to be all pompous and showy offy. Um, I'm not a
Opposite
fan.
showy offy. That's funny.
I mean, Cicero, I don't even know if I have a love hate with Cicero. Cicero also gives us the 5-paragraph essay. So your mileage may vary on whether you are a fan of, our background narrator here. But
Mm.
the thing is, this is relevant because what Africanus is telling the younger Cicero is about how he's going to destroy the city, right? So
Yeah.
here, to storm it, you have now come, ranking not much higher than a private soldier. 2 years hence, as consul, you will conquer it, thus winning for yourself the cognomen Africanus, which until now you have had as inheritance from me, right? So you'll earn your name, your real name. After destroying, and he goes on to talk about after destroying Carthage, you'll have this glittering career, right? Um,
Mm.
uh, so it's meant to be predictive for the dreamer, and then also situate him in the fullness of the cosmos.
So was this written before Carthage was destroyed?
No,
Is this
it's
okay?
written like 100 years after it's been destroyed.
Okay, because the way you described Cicero, I was wondering if it was just propaganda that he wrote for a campaign against Carthage, but no. Okay.
No, Carthage is gone by now.
Yeah.
And so I this is if it I'm projecting now just on the basis of the likely argument that's in the Republic, which I think we have to do kind of, because I think we lost a lot of the text. We got this dream because of Macrobius. That Cicero, being the defender of the Republic, is clearly, and if this is in book 6, it's, the sort of culmination of everything, showing the way in which indeed the Republic that he's been sketching for you fits in the structure of reality in the cosmos and is appropriate and true, because here's Africanus being shown its virtue through this dream that he has.
Yeah.
Yes, Sanjuro is saying the Black Legend is real. Yes, and there are Black Legends everywhere.
Yeah, they're throughout time. Yes.
This is the problem. It's like you're constantly potentially caught on one side of half of a conversation, and you don't understand why you're getting the villain depicted in the way that you are. And the thing is, what Casey's saying is true. There are real villains. Just because there's a Black Legend doesn't mean that there weren't villains. But which one?
Mm-hmm.
John is saying, isn't it all just a Rorschach test? We put a Rorschach test in Act 1 of Draco. Can we get 2 points?
Dreams can be a Rorschach test for sure. Yeah.
Well,
the symbols you have in your dreams.
What the old elder Africanus wants to tell the younger Africanus, who's about to destroy Carthage, is that this. If you behave virtuously and act heroically, you'll get to be a star, like literally. Right?
You're gonna be a star, baby.
Yeah, straight up Disney, right? So, but that you may be more, that you may be more zealous in safeguarding the Commonwealth, Scipio. Be persuaded of this: all those who have saved, aided, or enlarged the Commonwealth have a definite place marked off in the heavens, where they may enjoy a blessed existence forever. Nothing that occurs on earth, indeed, is more gratifying to that supreme God who rules the whole universe than the establishment of associations and federations of men bound together by principles of justice, which are called commonwealths. The governors and protectors of these proceed from here and return hither after death. There's the propaganda.
Yes. The state is all hail the state.
Ooh, yeah. And God.
But you're a God. Your soul is eternal. That's what he said.
Well, indeed. Okay, so we have so it does that. If I just read that out, imagine you're in 18th century Philadelphia, and you read this passage. We will read it again, right? Because, well, they all love Cicero in the 18th century, right? All those who have saved, aided, or enlarged the Commonwealth have a definite place marked off in the heavens where they may enjoy a blessed existence forever. Fathers of the country, right? Nothing that occurs on earth, indeed, is more gratifying to that supreme God who rules the whole universe than the establishment of associations and federations of men bound together by principles of justice, which are called commonwealths. I think that means republics. It's translation of republic. Mm-hmm. The governors and protectors of these proceed from here and return hither after death. So they proceed from the Milky Way and then go back up.
I just want to point out that Virginia is not a state. Virginia is a commonwealth.
Oh, indeed. Well, a commonwealth is it's an English word that they use a lot in the 16th and 17th centuries. But the Ciceronian element behind a lot of the theorizing about they were
neoclassicists that built that founded the country. Yeah. You could see it in the architecture and the language. It's a dead giveaway, yes, as is Lincoln's memorial, which is just way over the top. Sorry, it just is.
Well, but it fits absolutely in this vision, right? So if you say Christian rulership, because we're talking about God, right? Aren't we talking about God? Are we talking? God here, God who rules the whole universe, says that states should be well governed. We're in a little bit of dangerous territory here, Christian nationalists.
Yes.
Those who want to say that we are founded as a Christian nation and government and blah blah blah. I've got another colleague's book who's written on this, and I'm primed to read between the lines, right? Because this is not Christ. and neither would Macrobius make it Christ because he's probably pagan. All of the, the commentators later might say, well, and I'm wondering now about Dante's use of Macrobius, because he definitely uses this image of Dante's, ascent in contemplation through the celestial spheres, which we're about to do, right?
Hmm.
Dante is very much a recapitulation of this dream.
Yes.
And that, some of the things that Dante was very interested in was, uh, arguments for the monarchy as against the papacy because of
Mm.
Italian politics at the time. So when they get to Jupiter, there's the cantos around Jupiter in the Paradiso have to do with the rightful government and monarchy and things like that. But
Mm.
it has this very, Scipionian flavor of destiny, and
Mm.
if you rule well on Earth, you will ascend into
Mhm.
this category. The supreme God who rules the whole universe. It's not Christ in this story.
No, it is not.
No.
No, no, you can't retroactively apply that. That, and I think Catholics already understand this pretty well enough, but some other Christians might not. That doesn't mean it isn't worth reading. It's still worthwhile reading what people thought back then. As I was reading this, I thought, no wonder the Greeks converted as quickly as they did. They were so darn close. They were so darn close to the truth already.
Well, that's what Paul said when
Yes,
he goes to talk to the Athenians. Well, so
and
this,
it's apparent when you read this. I highly recommend it. Do.
okay, so this is, I'm glad you said that, because this is the challenge, right? So I'm in why am I on the internet having arguments with people? It's ridiculous. Um, I posted in my Substack something about, we posted our newsletter, right? And I was talking about words and the power of words. And of course, what I meant in the power of words is you can use them to label people, and then it acts back on your soul to convince yourself that you're fighting a monster and you're allowed to kill the monster. And
Right.
all of that power of the words it's not curse. I'm not going to say cursed just because, superstitious as I am. Um, you haven't actually thrown a bullet at the person that you've labeled that way, but you've done something to your own soul that gives you the willingness to act, which
Mm-hmm.
is very, very powerful and important. But somebody in Substack decided that I didn't know what I was talking about, and came in to tell me off because I was pretending that words matter in ways. He didn't read the post, and he wouldn't read the post. And I said, well, you mean it
Isn't it? Well,
affects
yeah.
your soul? And he's like, why are you talking about souls? You didn't say anything about souls. I'm like, you didn't click the link. Talk about, not following the track, right, of exactly what am I talking about here, and where is this coming from, and exactly what framing am I using to make this argument. But his contention is constantly, A, religion is made up and stupid, and B, I get to use the word that I have, white, to make you believe that you belong with me. And I'm like, you're doing it too, right?
Yeah.
Trying to make these magic words into things that describe reality that you are going to fight against, saying, well, my label it's the wrong label. This one's the real label, nominalists or realists or whatever. And claiming that you're going to be able to play this perfect discernment game between what the Greeks thought, well, the Septuagint is in Greek. The earliest Christians were Jews who had been reading it in Greek.
Mm-hmm.
Paul writes his letters in Greek because it's the great rhetorical language of the region.
Mm-hmm.
And the philosophy that John, who probably is Hebrew, uses Greek to talk about the word become flesh, the
Right.
logos. And then you have Cicero. The Romans are fascinated by the Greek philosophy, which is what Cicero is proving here. And they have a concept both of God who rules the universe and the structure of the universe, which includes the spheres, and I mean what
Mm-hmm.
Dante is going to put in his image of paradise, right?
Yes.
And figure out at which point you've tread onto the occult, right? Because you're talking about planetary
Yeah.
influences, which they do get to, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the zodiac, right? So now you've decided that all ancient philosophy is not only occult but Luciferian, and yet it's the reason we talk about the word becoming flesh.
It is. And isn't that interesting? It is interesting. Paul's endlessly fascinating because of this. Because a lot of people, modern day people, will point out that all pagan gods are demons. Paul said so,
Right.
right? But Paul actually spoke directly to the people who had this image of the universe, which included their Greek gods, and it made it very easy for them to understand the real one, which is why he had success with them.
Okay, so this is this is an interesting. I think we're going about conversion, talking to people wrong, right? And this is also the huge question that Charlie Kirk's death is bringing out for everybody. It's like he went and talked to people about Jesus, and he
Yes.
stood in the Pauline levels of go stand in the marketplace, or in our case, since we have no marketplaces because the malls are all shut, college campuses, and talk to people because we need our words to help each other see. I mean, mediate the. I'm talking about my words to live by, my metaphors and containers and things like that. The primary medium we have is language. Talking about things being mediated. They're all mediated through our speech, from our understanding in our minds to each other.
Right.
The primary medium is speech.
If you're not going to talk to people who you think are pagan, if they're going to slap a label on them, or maybe they slap this label on themselves. If you're going to say, "No, I'm sorry, as a Christian, I'm too good for that," well, you're not doing your job as a Christian. Charlie Kirk was doing his job. He was doing his job as a Christian. He would talk to anybody.
Right.
And this is what St. Paul did. He wasn't afraid of getting pagan cooties from people.
This is true. No pagan cooties. Right. Pagan just means hillbilly, basically. I mean, our version of it means it's just rustics, right? It's the people who live out in the countryside, because Christianity was a very urban religion.
Right.
The whole point of it is it's passes from city to city. Oh yes, and I had the best Twitter comment that I had was, I saw today something about arguing about, well, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and at that point it was this province in Judea, which is this province in subset in Syria, which and under the Roman Empire, which means Jesus was Italian.
Italian. Yeah, I saw that. That was ridiculous.
Great.
Pretty funny.
And they've got control of that region because of what happened during Cicero's lifetime, right? So, and because they destroyed Carthage 100 years before that, so they were in control of the sea. Because the reason they went after Carthage was primarily because they were maritime rivals, and they Romans.
There was that whole invasion thing too.
What?
There was that whole invasion thing too. Isn't that thing? Carthage famously invaded Rome over the Alps with Hannibal.
Oh, right. And Scipio Africanus defeated him, and the grandfather in this dream vision defeats Hannibal in that encounter, and then his grandson comes along and wipes out the city. But Hannibal's doing that in the Second Punic War. Now I've forgotten why the first one starts, right? But the main reality is, in the same year in which Scipio Africanus destroys, in 146 BC, when he destroys Carthage, the Romans also capture and take control of Corinth and destroy it, which is on a strait, but access to the Peloponnesus. So they're in big maritime mode at this point, conquering the sea and making it their sea. So that Paul eventually comes along and is able to travel in the way that he is around the Mediterranean is because Jesus was Italian. Or the thing is, Italian. Or probably spoke Greek, right? Because everybody's reading the scriptures in Greek in that region because they're Greek, and
Paul was.
They're writing in Greek because that's the language the people in the city spoke.
He was a Roman citizen. He spoke Latin and Greek and Hebrew, and he could get around very easily, and not just because of the Pax Romana, which was real. As brutal as they were, they actually kept the ocean's lanes open and the roads. So he was able to travel
fought
very
all the pirates. No, there's a big pirate clearing I'm so tired these days. I cannot remember any words. I just have the thought that there is a word that goes with that.
What are words?
Expedition.
I did
What
like
are
that.
words? Right. It's like, what are our medium of words, right?
Ah,
What we've been talking about right now is God. I mean, the word for
yes.
God, what concept they're doing, and what you're saying about how when Paul goes and says, "Look, you're so close, I can show you this." Much of what we have is our concept of God, including our sense of God as creator and the universe that he created, comes from this ancient model, right? It's like
Mm,
God creates the heaven and earth. But the Old Testament comes out of a culture that had contact with Babylon famously because Nebuchadnezzar captures the elite and carries them off there, right? And then when they come
mm,
back, they have to rewrite everything because the books have been lost, and so it's all written down by Ezra. Guess what, right? That all of these cultures and conversations are overlapping a great deal more. I mean, it's interesting that people are worried about it now, right? We have all this globalism and stuff. It's like, do you understand history? do you
no,
do
no.
you understand how much of this overlap has been a feature of it all the time and all along?
Mhm.
So here Cicero writing in Latin is giving you the Greek version of things, which then talks about God, which is then one of the images that's going to be used throughout Christian, tradition to give us the sense of what kind of cosmos we live in, which is then, of course, the scientific one we live in with, gravity. Okay. Um, oh, and then there's another layer that's still in the open. We'll come back to this in 2 weeks because that will be good. I mean, we'll still be talking
Mhm.
about the planets and the music of the spheres and things like that. But let's talk about um the souls go up back into the heavens and they end up among the Milky Way where they get to be all stars. Which Lewis did like this. He liked this in uses it in Voyage of the Dawn Treader when
Mm,
they find a fallen star and talk to it, I think.
mm.
Yeah. And then I think Reepicheep goes into the sun and you get the sense anyway, the sort of feeling of like where do you go as a soul and
Mhm.
that the souls are there. Um Oh, he's up there in the Milky Way, and he starts seeing friends and saying, "Oh no, they're alive, right?" So it's like Dante seeing souls. I mean,
Yes.
and of course these men are alive. His grandfather says, "Who have flown from the bonds of their bodies as from a prison. Indeed, that life of yours, as it is called, is really death. Just look up and see your father Paulus approaching you. When I saw him, I wept profusely, but he embraced and kissed me and forbade me to weep. As soon as I could check my tears and speak out, I said, I pray you, most revered and best of fathers, since this is truly life, as I hear Africanus tell, why do I linger on earth? Why do I not hasten hither to you?" And this is where it comes in the thing about saying you can't kill yourself and show up sooner
Right. Right.
because it's not appropriate. So we think is suicide
Mhm.
is the prohibition of suicide, is it actually Christian? Is there anything in the scriptures about suicide?
I think there is actually.
Oh, good. Can you find
Find it
it?
for you. Yeah, I'll look for that.
Um, I, I think sometimes we're not sure, right? And as we were just talking now, it's like, how do you separate out their worldview from the context in which they were evangelized? And say, well, if the Romans had this vision of the cosmos, and then they come to understand that Christ is the creator of it, are they wrong about which part of it are they wrong about?
Yeah. Right.
Well, this is an
They're
go ahead.
they're wrong about the body being a prison.
Well, and this is, I mean, right, because we
Right.
fight that as the Neoplatonic or Gnostic version of things, is saying the material world
Mhm.
is all evil in a prison.
Right. They tended to look at the body as just nothing more than a vessel instead of an integrated whole, but body and soul.
That's definitely in Paul. He is very strong on that imagery of incarnation. but he's oddly, I mean, I can understand why people are frustrated with Paul that he doesn't say other things. But who said it, and why are you so convinced that that's the part of the tradition you can clearly distill out from? It's like metallic assaying, right? You want to be able to assay out all the alloys, and we have unalloyed truth, as opposed to right, as opposed to
pure,
bronze or
adulterated
something.
truth here.
Pure truth. John Nabrisi is asking, can words describe reality, essence? Well, it's a mediated problem. Okay, so we've got them up in the stars, and younger Africanus sees his relatives, including his father, and he's asked his father, why can't I come here? Why do I have to stay here? And Paulus says, you are mistaken, for until that God who rules all region of the sky, at which you are now looking, has freed you from the fetters of your body, you cannot gain admission here. This is that God who rules all the region of the sky. Then I start wondering what Macrobius says in his commentary. We won't go there yet. This is still just the Ciceronian version.
Yeah.
Men were created with the understanding that they were to look after that sphere called earth, which you see in the middle of the temple. Minds have been given to them out of the eternal fires you call fixed stars and planets, those spherical solids which, quickened with divine minds, journey through their circuits and orbits with amazing speed. Wherefore, Scipio, you and all other dutiful men must keep your souls in the custody of your bodies, and must not leave this life of men except at the command of that one who gave it to you. I mean, that sounds to me like the argument that a lot of people use against suicide.
Yeah.
That you may not appear to have deserted the office assigned you. That's different. Because this is Cicero trying to make it an obligation to serve the government, right?
He was, right? But it could also be applied to anybody who hears it.
Right.
Everybody needs their part.
Well, and our theme tonight of being, you don't really know where you got all this stuff. And if we start hunting it down, you're going to be even more worried than you are usually on the internet.
So get to the Halloween bit.
Which Halloween bit? What? Oh, we'll just keep doing that. This is our Halloween season, right? We're going to be doing the Dream of Scipio until Halloween
season.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, we do have a Tolkienian guest in the middle of all of this, right? But we'll just stick with this problem of the reality that Cicero gives us, that Macrobius comments on, that turns into Dante and Chaucer, and yet
I thought it was
What?
I'm sorry. I thought it was a really Halloween bit when he explains what happens to people who desert their post, so to speak.
Oh, where's that? Is that?
It was in the next couple of lines, I think.
Okay, keep going.
Where he stopped.
But Scipio, cherish justice and your obligations to duty, as your grandfather here and I, your father, have done. This is important where parents and relatives are concerned, but is of utmost importance in matters concerning the Commonwealth. And I think Commonwealth here is a republic, right? So this is your governmental role requires you. This sort of life is your passport into the sky. This is a hilarious translation. To a union with those who have finished their lives on earth, and who, upon being released from their bodies, inhabit that place at which you are now looking. It was a circle of surpassing brilliance gleaming out amidst the blazing stars, which takes its name, the Milky Way, from the Greek word. Was that the part you were thinking of?
No.
You mean the crazy bit where he gets at the end where how he's a god, right?
No, not that one. In between. So at a certain point, he talks about what happens to people who desert their post, and basically they're ghosts.
Maybe you had a different you have a different translation.
I got the one you gave me.
I know. I'm using a different one. You don't have a book. I gave you the online one I had access to.
Sneaky. But yeah, it's he doesn't use the word ghosts even in the translation you gave me, but he said basically they wander the earth.
Aha. Okay, so they don't get they don't get to be up there in the stars.
No, they don't. They're stuck on Earth.
They're stuck on Earth if they die before they finish their government duties.
That sounds like an old joke about purgatory being for civil servants or something. Suicides become civil servants in the afterlife. They did this in Beetlejuice. Yeah, Tim Burton didn't invent that. That's an old joke.
That's it.
It came from this.
Well, I mean, what we are trying to establish is a lot of stuff you thought you knew came from this by way of Macrobius and all these poets that we've read.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about the if you're haunted, if you're haunted by things that you're just absolutely convinced are absolutely true, there's usually, I mean, this is what Tolkien actually enjoyed, right? The philological tracing of this kind of
Mm-hmm.
path, right? How do you where and Lewis, insofar as he was a literary historian, which he was. I mean, he actually wrote the Oxford book of the history of English literature other than drama in the 16th century, which he hilariously called his Oh Hell, because it was his HEL, History of English Literature, Oxford History of English Literature.
Cute.
And it's a giant frustrating book for him to write, because the 16th century is filled with people who liked this kind of intermingling of natural history, philosophical philosophy, uh this language play and things like that. So if you're reading stuff like Shakespeare or Spencer, they're like steeped in it,
Mm-hmm.
which Lewis's point, but we've passed over something that's actually wild. Men were created with the understanding that they were to look after that sphere called Earth, which you see in the middle of the temple. What temple?
Creation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I didn't, I mean, I'm really obsessed with the temple because the temple imagery is absolutely critical to Christianity, witnessed by the letter to the Hebrews, particularly, and that Christ passes through the veil into the world, right? This is temple imagery of the straight up sort of the God is in the Holy of Holies, in the heavenly
Mm-hmm.
chamber, and passes from the heavenly chamber into the world, right? You go back to read that passage from Hebrews, right? It's in the New Testament, so don't be telling me sola scriptura. I'm talking something that's not there. It passes into the world through the veil, which in Philo he explains is the allegory of the elements, right? So Christ passes from the Holy of Holies, heaven, into the world through the veil and becomes incarnate, and then goes back out, right? So and carries the sacrifices, which is what the high priest
Mm-hmm.
does when he goes back into the Holy of Holies, carrying the sacrifices of the people. All of that temple imagery is for most modern Christians probably a little strange and odd, but you can bet their ears went wee when you have something like, here's Cicero talking in terms of the whole cosmos is a temple with the earth at the
Right.
center. Now, it does not feel like these are completely separate worlds, right? And this becomes a problem too. There's a lot of the Kabbalah, which I referenced, gestured to briefly, has a lot of numerology in it. Well, numerology is, we're going to find out more when we read more through the Dream of Scipio and the commentary,
Mm-hmm.
straight up Pythagorean mysticism, which Plato seems to have picked up when he's in Syracuse, probably. I'm reading, here's another book, Globe. This one's good. Um, uh, this is James Hannum's How the Earth Became Round, and he goes through, it's a similar kind of backstory of the discarded image, but in a mode of history of science. Um, Plato gets the Pythagorean stuff and then starts putting it into his celestial visions and such. This is Macrobius as a Neoplatonist is going to take up all of this stuff, gets mixed. The mixture of things. The Kabbalah, you can say, and this is why the guys who discover it, like Pico della Mirandola in the 15th century, the humanists start thinking it's all the same, right? This is the famous, Italian humanist, Jesus was Italian, who they're constantly finding echoes of stuff that they heard in other places, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's all saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
These moments of it's not just syncretism, it's connecting. It's like that spider in the middle of that web, keep that in mind, has been drawing these sorts of connections within the traditions, across the traditions all along. There's not like, here's a strand of paganism and here's a strand of Christianity and here's a strand of Hebrew, and here's a strand of who knows what else, right? And you can separate them all out and make sure that no thing is touching any other, that um, goes into the web of reality. This does not mean that there's no way of telling the difference between Lucifer and Christ.
Right.
But it means that a lot of the criteria that people are using right now are confounded by the problem that they don't know enough of the history of the tradition.
No, they don't. They'll reflexively say one of two things. Either it's all occult and satanic and reject it, or they'll say everything's the same. There's no difference.
Exactly, right? They make it, they I just dropped my books. They do a easy binary. And if you say,
Mhm.
if you say again what you just said, say that again. That
I
was
said
good.
they people will choose one of two things. They will either reflexively reject everything as occult and satanic, or they'll say everything's the same. Christianity's the same as Greek mythology, is the same as Zoroastrianism, is the same as just, fill in the blanks. It's all the same.
Exactly.
Heard that phrase a lot.
Right.
No, neither one is true. It's a false binary. so altogether false.
Exactly. And I do think Lewis, I think it's fair to say Lewis probably fell more on the side of, he was delighted with the idea that it was all the same. He was comforted
Yes.
by that mythological cross patterning that he felt like he found it. And we've talked about this before, that I think, Joseph Campbell does it in his Heroes of a Thousand Faces, and I drastically disagree with, I mean, although Campbell did do a commentary on Joyce, and we need to deal with Ulysses eventually, and Finnegan's Wake. And people like Jordan Peterson, all of the Petersonians and the symbolists and stuff, are enchanted by that feeling of finding all of these connections. But Tolkien specifically ridicules it when Robert Graves finds all that kind of connections in White Goddess. So it's this sort of easy binary between above the moon it's all perfect and below the moon it's all rotten, right?
Yeah.
Thinking is, as you said, like below the moon it's all occult. Everything, everything that isn't like exactly word for word in what we find in the scriptures, which you will find complicated to interpret if you do it that way, because there's pretty wild stuff in there. Fire-breathing dragons, right there in Job, right? Yahweh, the Lord, fights the dragon. Are you going to tell me that this, the dragon stories don't belong in our effort to understand what going to reality is? The morning star is both Christ and Lucifer. You're in
Yeah, it
trouble
doesn't mean,
now.
yeah. Christ and Lucifer are not the same person. And there are certain religious traditions which believe they're brothers.
Is that
Which some may
Mormonism?
name this.
Is that the Mormons?
Spirit brothers, yeah.
Right. Okay. So we are here to make better distinctions and to serve our Lord Jesus Christ. But the problem is, and why the discernment of spirits takes training and attention and not simple turning into pod people and screaming at each other, is, I mean, in some ways it's the nature of our minds, right? It's the nature of how difficult it is for us to know what stories we've heard are true. And why that is. Like, why is it? Because people lie to each other, because we fabricate stories, because we use stories to manipulate each other into being on our side or the other side. It's a fascinating, and Cicero right up there. I mean, we should probably talk about Ciceronian rhetoric sometime. And I should learn more about how Cicero, engineers the death of the Republic.
And I should read something besides 10 pages of what he's ever written.
I haven't read that much Cicero, right? I don't like him,
This
and
is the first
I'm
one I've
justified
read.
now in my dislike for him. So ha ha ha, right? He was siding with the
It
oligarchs.
was Cicero's ghost. He could tell you don't like him. He showed
I
up and made you
see.
dog bark.
See, so my discernment is actually spot on and true, right? Anyway, let's see with the chat. You got any questions? So River Run is saying Halloween spiders, right? Well, we're in now. We promised, carry on. This is multi-part conversation. Hopefully everybody can settle in and start realizing that to really get through what we're trying to understand that's happening to us in this media environment and in the moment of history that we're in and in the layers of stories and the multiplying turtles of foundation that we are trying to navigate. The only way we can do this is if we just settle in and stream this long form.
Yes.
It's not going to work if we get worried. And this is where I think Martyr Maid actually just says, I'm going to go on for 6 hours. If you want to understand this, you got to settle in and be with me. We can't make sense of things only in clips, right? The clips can be little bright sparkle sparks of, here, look at this, here, look at that, here, look at this, here, look at this. But as we talked about at the beginning, if you do that and you don't let yourself dream properly, come into the dream with us in the Mosaic Ark. Come into this long study so that you actually can order things correctly and not go,
Yes.
not and make the connections properly rather than in waking horror.
Yes. Sound bites got us into a mess.
Oh man, yeah.
Sound bites do not help us understand anything or each other.
Very well said. And certainly not in the continuing, attention that we're paying to what Charlie Kirk had been saying, and the way in which people are representing what he did not say, even using when he's saying someone's name as if it's a racial slur. Which,
Yeah.
that means you've so dissociated language from referent that you can't even realize the context in which someone was talking. This is fragmented reality beyond madness.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to settle in and be able to I suppose dream properly, right? If we're in a dream, not dream madly. So, and the daydreamer
We don't
shows up
want
and says, "Hello,
nightmares.
ladies. Hello, daydreamer."
Hello.
If you just joined, you're going to enjoy this. You're going to enjoy this episode in recording. Okay, well, I think that's enough for tonight. It's like Dream of Scipio to be continued, and we're going to be touching on more of the elements. If there's particular things that I mentioned in that list of things that Stahl says Macrobius was responsible for people to think about, and you want to hear more about it, please say so. Otherwise, we're just gonna do what we do and ride the wave. Okay, all right. Yeah, we need a catchphrase for out. It's like dream with us. No, I said this. I said
Oh, no,
we got to come up with some way to bookend things. I said this on the Mosaic Ark a while ago. We take you places you've only seen in dreams.
True.
We take you places you've only seen in dreams. Thank you for joining us. Good night.